NCERT textbooks. This is a subject that we have talked about quite often. लेकिन एवरी टाइम वी टॉक्ड अबाउट तो हमने बात की है मुख्यतः इतिहास के बारे में, सोशल साइंसेस के बारे में. बट व्हाट अबाउट साइंस एंड मैथ्स? क्या साइंस और मैथ्स की टेक्स्ट बुक्स जस्ट परफेक्ट? व्हाट डू यू थिंक? चलिए बात करते हैं इसके बारे में. एंड वी हैव डॉक्टर CK राजू विद अस. आइए सब्सक्राइब कीजिए. और उसके साथ साथ आप हमें सपोर्ट करना चाहें तो यू कैन गो टू द डिस्क्रिप्शन, वहाँ पर लिंक है और उस लिंक के आप हमें हेल्प कर सकते हैं, सपोर्ट कर सकते हैं. लेट्स गो. Namaste and welcome to this 7 p.m. show, and I have got who else but Dr. CK Raju with us. Dr. CK Raju doesn't really need an introduction to the Jaipur Dialogue audience, but for those who are probably seeing him for the first time. So the last time we met, our number of subscribers was around 50,000, but now we are closer to 325,000. So we have had phenomenal growth. So also the new subscribers who have come here and have not watched you speak here, let me introduce Dr. CK Raju. He's an eminent scientist. Right now he's working with the Indian Institute of Advanced Studies, Shimla, and a number of things that he has to his credit. One of them, of course, is the Param computer when India had been abandoned by the West and told to fend for itself. At that time, he took up the cudgels and brought in a computer revolution, the supercomputer revolutions to India. And then he, as a foremost mathematician, has had to his credit debunking of several theories and also added to the theory of Einstein by bringing in a new modification. So, welcome once again to the Jaipur Dialogues.
Thank you.
And you have done a lot of research on the NCERT books. And everybody says that NCERT books on history are trash, but are the science books and the mathematics books great?
No, not really. And have been fighting quarrel for a long, long time. I mean, could I introduce a few preliminary remarks?
Yes,
Could I
please.
start with
Yes.
that? Yeah. So what I want to say is that we believe what happened to the okay, this is StreamYard. All right. So we believe that Macaulay changed our educational system. No, that's not quite true, because the education system changed the same way throughout the world. We look at, for example, Lebanon, or you look at Argentina, or you look at various parts of Africa, French colonies, and so on. Throughout Portuguese colonies, look at Brazil. So this education was globalized. It's not one person. It is a big organization. It is the church. So I think that unless we find the right causes, we are not going to find the right solutions. And when I mention the church in the context of math and science, people say, what has the church got to do with math and science? So I'm going to try and show you that. As you said, one issue is, of course, the false history that they talk about. And Macaulay used a lot of false history. So, but the point is, church is interested in education. It was church education which came to India, and well, which went not just came to India, went across the world, because education is a means of power. It is like it's a means of mental power. You train a dog, and they really thought of us like that, Indians and dogs. So you train a dog, and the dog trainer, he exercises power over the dog. And they actually write that. When the church wrote its first false history in the 5th century, Orosius' History Against the Pagans, he actually talked about how dogs can be made to do what the master desires by fairly simple training. So I think that is the church interest in education. We need to understand that. And well, this was tried out in a variety of ways in India. The whole church power. See, it got power through Constantine. Constantine's son was educated, and it seized the whole Roman Empire. In India also they tried the same stuff. In 1580s, the Jesuit missionaries from Goa, they went to Akbar's court, and Akbar was much smarter than Constantine, but they tried the same plot that they would educate his son Murad, but it didn't succeed. They couldn't grab power. By the time of Macaulay, the issue was different. It was not about grabbing power, it was about retaining power. And the techniques were still the same, because the idea is that the education system which came, the church education system, it was a Trojan horse. And as a Trojan horse, we should have looked at its what is inside it. And the carrot that was dangled was that the West is so good, so immensely superior. That was Macaulay's phrase. Immensely, immeasurably superior in science. And therefore, if we want science, and of course mathematics goes with it, then we should imitate the West. And we never thought that the church could be mixed up in this. But it is. And that is when I keep talking about Euclid, people have not quite understood that. So let's take an example. All right, let me start with the textbook that we have of NCERT. So I want to now change to this tab. Can you see this tab? I forgot. Your StreamYard, how do I share this tab?
You have share at the bottom. Go to share.
Share screen, and I want to share screen, not the whole screen. I want to share a tab.
So you can share.
Screen. Let's see what it gets. Okay. So this is the tab I want to share. Are you able to see it? Not able to see it?
1 minute, please.
This one is what I want. Not entire screen. I want a Chrome tab. Okay. Euclid from NCERT, Class 9 Mathematics. I'm showing you the NCERT text. I'm trying to show you. Share it is.
Share is at the bottom.
Yeah. Okay, fine. It was hidden. All right. Here we are. All right. Now you are able to see it?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Able to see it.
Right. So this is the
Introduction to Euclid's Geometry.
Introduction to Euclid's Geometry. This is chapter 5 in the class 9 NCERT text. And now I want to show you what it is that I'm talking about, how Euclid gets mixed up with the church. You see, they say that everybody had geometry. See, all ancient people had geometry. And you see, India had the Shulba Sutra, and you had Harappa and Mohenjo-daro and so on and so forth. They were very well planned. And Shulba Sutra and things like that. Egypt had its pyramids. The Maya had pyramids. Similar thing in Babylon or Iraq. But, so you look at this highlighted sentence. Though accurate geometric methods were used for the construction of altars, etc., the principles behind them were not discussed. Of course, they were discussed, they have to be understood. Then you look at this. Whatever was happening throughout the world, it was happening in an unsystematic manner. Then we say that in some civilizations like Babylon, Egypt, etc., it was done, there was only a statement of results. There were no general rules of procedure. And it was done for practical purposes. What is wrong with doing things for practical purposes? But anyway, that's what they say. This is the criticism. And only the Greeks, now this sentence is the critical sentence, only the Greeks, no, they were interested in establishing the truth of the statements they discovered using deductive reasoning. And see Appendix 1. So this is critical because Appendix 1 talks about mathematical proof, and that is where we will eventually be headed. Let me get back to the, anyway, I am visible here, right? So I can keep this on.
Yeah.
So this idea that something superior that the Greeks did, which the whole world did not do. This is the classic church idea of using false history. That whatever they did, whatever the whites did, whatever the West did, whatever the Christians did was superior. This is how they started. They went to racism, then they went to colonialism. All right. So what does it mean in terms of geometry, right? So this is an old church trick. So what they are saying is that there was this Euclid who did something and who did something great and superior. So first question is, was there any Euclid? All right, we go step by step because to understand what was the church intervention is a little hard. So we go step by step. Was there a Euclid? Now, this issue that there was no Euclid, you see, I have been contesting this for a very long time. So way back in 2002, I was with, on a mailing list. I talked with David Fowler. He was the leading Western expert on the history of Greek mathematics. And he admitted that there is no evidence for Euclid. You know, somebody said, who is this Raju? What is he saying? That this was 2002. Who is this Raju? What is he saying that Euclid does not exist? Please tell us. So he said just one word. What is known about Euclid? Nothing. Just one word. And that is there in my book, Euclid and Jesus. It is there on the internet. And the next question was, what do we know about his book? The book comes from the 10th century, late 10th century. Well, 9th century to be very precise, if you want, 888, but it's from the 10th century. So now the thing is, he was an expert. He knew there is no primary evidence. Then I complained to NCERT. I talked to, I think, Krishna Kumar was the director at that time. And when my book, Cultural Foundations of Mathematics, was being released, I said, well, there was a chapter on Euclid there. So I asked him, please send somebody. So he sent the head of the mathematics department. He came, he attended, came, saw, left. And what was his statement? When I said, what is your evidence for Euclid? He had no problem. He simply said that, why do you, let me show you this tab. Let me share it. Okay, share. Not video file. I want to share a tab. Do I need to first stop the share?
I think so.
Okay, let's stop the screen. And then let me share again. Share screen and then share again tab. It just disappears. Okay, tab. Which tab do I have? I am Euclid. Yeah, here it is. Now, how do I share this? This is a little problematic. I can't see it in this magnification. Okay, I think that's the one. Let's take a look. Are you able to see it?
Yes.
The cartoon? Or maybe I'm sharing the wrong. Here it is. Yeah, are you able to see it?
Yes.
Okay, so this is what he said. Why do we want evidence? We go by a committee. That's
gone. I think it appeared and then something else came.
It appeared and disappeared. Okay, let me get back to it. It says shop. Okay, never mind. Let me go ahead with what I'm saying. The point is, his thing was quite hilarious. That it is unimportant to have evidence. We go by a committee. Some committee decided, why do you want evidence? Then that is the whole idea, And so there is no evidence. He doesn't have. Then as you know, I offered a prize. I offered a prize of 2 lakh rupees. So let me show you that. This is important. I must show you the. Okay.
Maybe you
Now
need to enhance the price. That's been 2 lakh for more than 10 years.
I'll tell you what happened. so, so where is this tab gone? This is the tab I want, and how do here it is. This is what I want to share. Are you able to see it? This is a little problem with this. Are you able to see this thing?
Not
Or
yet.
not?
Yes. No, yes.
Hi, Euclid.
Yeah, goodbye, Euclid.
Yeah, goodbye, Euclid. So there are 3 videos. This was a talk that I gave in front of the Malaysian Deputy Education Minister chaired it. And there are these 3 videos, which is visual proof that I offered this prize. So this prize was offered. And then...
No, but what my suggestion is that this has been a long time. It is stuck at 2 lakh. Nobody's coming to challenge it. So you might as well add another zero to it.
My means
That's
are
what
limited.
That's what we did with our AIT prize. Of course, nobody is going to claim that either. But
Yeah, yeah,
now
yeah.
it's a 2 crore 10 lakhs. Even then, nobody is coming. So I think this 2
Exactly.
lakh you can make it. You can safely make it 2 crores. Nobody will still come. So at least the figure will be impressive.
Yeah, I can do that. I can do that. I will definitely consider this suggestion, what to do about it. And may not be 2 crores, but I can certainly raise it to say 10 lakhs or something like that. All right. Because, it should be credible that I am able to pay it in case I lose. Otherwise, it doesn't carry. Nobody's going to take it.
I will find you sponsors. Don't worry.
Okay. That will be very good. Thank you. So this is what was done, and then in 2019, somebody registered a grievance with NCERT. All right, and the NCERT response to that was very similar. That first they didn't give any answer, then they said, well, it is stated in so many Western textbooks. So the correct proof for history is primary evidence. And the grievance specifically asked for primary evidence for Euclid, because that primary evidence we know from the days of Fowler 20 years ago does not exist. So this was the wishy-washy answer that you can find Euclid in so many textbooks and therefore it must be true. Now you cannot do things like that. Now I will tell you what the point is, not just about history, the point is about the way mathematics is done. But the history is just something which leads up to it. So let's go to the. There is evidence, there is no evidence, and there is plenty of counter evidence. So I think what we need to understand is who concocted Euclid and why. That's the interesting thing that we need to understand. It's a false history, okay, but why? And why is it there still in our textbooks? Because obviously it is something which was done with a great deal of influence and power, and for some very strong reason. All right. So who concocted and why? Now, what I'm trying to suggest is, what I'm not suggesting, what I'm stating is that, the lack of evidence for Euclid is a long story. It is there in my book. The title of the book is How and Why the Church Changed Mathematics and Christianity Across Two Religious Wars. This is my book, Euclid and Jesus. The subtitle is this: there was a change in mathematics and Christianity across two religious wars. Now, the most important war that we are talking about is the Crusades, which is a religious war fought against the Muslims. And I'm suggesting that it was at this time that Euclid was concocted. So the point is, we get confused. The Greeks, what is the connection of Greeks to the church? So I'm trying to give you that connection. That what happened during the Crusades, that the church was fighting with the Muslims, trying to conquer them and convert them. It failed. The way pagans were converted in Europe, it was all done by force. But they failed to convert the Muslims because Muslims were much too strong. They were wealthy. Of course, we call it a religious war, but the real target was their wealth. But they failed, and when they failed, they could not persuade So when they tried to persuade, because what was their means of persuasion? Bible. But the Muslims rejected the Bible as corrupt. Therefore, what they needed was something which Muslims accepted. At that point, there was the Akli Kalam. They accepted reason. And because they accepted reason, the church decided to adopt reason. And if you go back to that page that I showed you, what it says is that the Greeks used reason. But there are no Greeks who did it. But still, that is the story that is being told by our church. Now, where did this reason get into the church? Because you see, the church policy prior to the Crusades was to burn books. Even in India, they burnt books. They burnt the Bible, the Syrian Christian Bibles are the oldest Bibles in the world, and they were all burnt in 1599. Maybe one copy was kept and is found in some Oxford library, but most of them were collectively burnt because they were so different. Anyway, the point is, it was the church policy to burn books. Now, what could the church do? You see, they were losing. They realized they were losing because of lack of knowledge, scientific knowledge. Now, scientific knowledge is useful in war, even in a religious war. And so they wanted to acquire it. So when they acquired the Toledo library, they decided to translate it. But how can they translate? Because they are burning books, and it's the time of religious fanaticism, a religious war, and they are saying, this is the enemy and we should burn everything he has. How could they translate? So to translate, they invented an excuse. And the excuse was that all knowledge in Arabic books, we know so much knowledge went from India. But they said that all knowledge in Arabic books was due to the Greeks. Now, it's a war going on and nobody bothered about history. Even today, nobody bothers about history. It's very easy to persuade people, just tell them a story. And that is how the Greeks like Euclid were invented. Euclid book, the book that we are talking about, came to Europe in 1125. One through a crusading spy, the other through the fall of Toledo. And it was translated. It was translated on the pretext that it is done by Greeks. The Greeks are the sole friends of Christians. That is what Eusebius, the first church historian, had said. So because they are the sole friends of Christians, they said this knowledge was just in safekeeping by the Arabs. It is actually our inheritance. And therefore we can translate it. It's a very, fig leaf. But it was credible, and it has been credible since then. Till now, there is no evidence for Euclid. So they said this was our book. Now, what is the special thing about Euclid? The special thing about Euclid is that the church wanted reason to persuade Muslims. But how could it use reason? It can't say Muslims do it, therefore we will do it. It has to say reason is our inheritance. But Aristotle, of course, was not good enough. Point is, today you have people saying rationalists are against superstitions. So if reason is against superstition, and if the church rules on the strength of superstition, whatever superstition, virgin birth, this, that, if it rules on that basis, how can it adopt reason? And that is the trick, and that is the deep trick. They decided to adopt reason without facts, because they understood they can manage reason. They can't manage facts. So how do you justify virgin birth on the basis of facts?
Dr. Raju, Muslims also gave up reason around about 11th, 12th century.
No, we'll get into that discussion about Al-Ghazali later. But at the moment, what happened was that the church was aligned with Ibn Rushd, who was Al-Ghazali's opponent. And when they talked about Aristotle and so on, they were talking about the writings of Ibn Rushd, Averroes. So whether this happened or not is a different issue. What we are discussing right now is, Euclid and the textbook that we have got. It is our problem right now. All right. Whatever may have happened then, right now is our problem. The point
is it only with respect to geometry, or there are other things as well?
There are lots, everything in mathematics. Euclid is just a starting point. Everything that is done in mathematics today is done on that basis. We are talking of reason. What kind of reason? So when the church adopted a theology of reason, they wanted a special type of reason, reasoning without facts. You see, the word reason was stated there. Shall we go back to that book? Let me share the screen again. Share screen. Okay, where is my tab? I can't see it at this resolution. Let me switch off the other tabs. Okay, maybe that will help. Okay, let me switch off this. Okay, so now I should have just one thing. Yeah, here we are. We share this. Is it visible?
Yes.
Okay, so we go back to that. You see, the point that is being made, the Greeks were interested in establishing the truth of statements they discovered using deductive reasoning. That's the critical
So
statement.
what's so special about deductive reasoning? Why not
Yeah, I'm coming to that.
inductive reasoning? I
Yes,
mean, empiricism
deductive
is
reasoning.
infinitely better, isn't it?
Isn't what better?
Empiricism?
Oh, yes, of course. I believe in that. I 100% believe in that. There is no doubt about it. But what they have been saying is deductive reasoning is infallible, whereas empirical proofs are fallible. And therefore, deductive reasoning is superior. That is the argument. I have a whole paper on that. This is just a superstition and so on. I will show you that in a minute. Okay. So the point is we have a situation where the reason that we are talking about is being attributed to Greeks, but they are fictitious Greeks. It is actually church reason. And it is reason without facts. You see, we are talking of empiricism, but they are saying no empiricism, no facts should come in. That's the whole idea of mathematical proof, and that's the way all mathematics is done today throughout the world. You must prove things deductively. So this is the central issue, and this is what the story of Euclid is about. That you tell a false story, and then you start reasoning in a method which was politically convenient to the church at that particular time. And it's always been, you can say you are doing things based on reason and not facts. So Aquinas, for example, will prove, so many angels can sit on the head of a pin. Why? Because you assume that angels occupy no space. And same way we teach in geometry that points occupy no space, and so on. So you start with an assumption. That assumption, whether in set theory or in geometry or in anything, any branch of mathematics, those assumptions are laid down authoritatively in the West. And we follow them just blindly. Just as we follow, we don't even ask for the evidence of Euclid. We don't ask what kind of reason. We don't ask what is the point of deductive reasoning. And we simply follow it blindly. So this is the situation. There was a Christian theology of reason. That Christian theology of reason needed reasoning without facts. And we confuse formal reasoning or metaphysical reasoning or church reasoning, which is without facts, with normal reasoning or scientific reasoning, which is reasoning with facts. And that was the method of reasoning in India. When you talk of Anuman, it is based on pratyaksh, which is based on some facts, and from that you want to infer something. So you say you see smoke and you infer fire. That's based on a fact. But here you are doing on a purely metaphysical postulate. You are avoiding the empirical on the grounds that the empirical is fallible. This was the church theology. It was very politically convenient. Now it is built into formal mathematics, which came with the West. Because Euclidean geometry was never taught. What we taught was Raju Ganit, and what we did, the kind of proofs that we did were quite different. So axiomatic reasoning is what is being used in mathematics today, and axiomatic reasoning is reasoning minus facts. And what we do in mathematics is axiomatic proof, and this system of proof is contrary to all Indian Ganit. It is contrary to all Indian philosophy, because you talked of empiricism. The first step is pratyaksh. You should accept the pratyaksh. And all Indian philosophy accepts the pratyaksh. But you prohibit the pratyaksh in mathematical proof. Anything that you can see is fallible. That is the argument. It's a bad argument, wrong argument. I've written about it so many times. It's a superstitious argument. But simple detail like what is the evidence of Euclid if NCERT is not able to, they'll say, oh, this is stated in Western books. You read it. Therefore it is true. We don't know. Our committee said it. We don't know. So this is what it is doing. When you're talking of mathematics, you're talking about science. It is teaching you a second-rate kind of mathematics, and this whole process begins. Now you see, the point is, the myth says that there are axiomatic proofs in Euclid. This is false. It's completely false. So the church was dominant and Westerners believed it. They believed it for centuries. But at least for 100 years, it is known that there are no axiomatic proofs in Euclid. The myth is not just about the person Euclid, it is also about the book. Because the church wanted to adopt it, they wanted a book, they said there are axiomatic proofs in the book, and people believed it. But there are no axiomatic proofs. Now, this is about the book, it's easy to check. And in fact, it has been checked. Bertrand Russell, for example, let me show you what he wrote. So, Bertrand Russell wrote, now I have to stop sharing this and go to the other tab. All right, share. So, are you seeing Bertrand Russell anywhere? Is this visible? This thing is a little difficult for me to manage. Let me put this off. Now there should be just one thing here. And I should share that. My eyesight is not that good. All right, can you see this article by Bertrand Russell, Teaching of Euclid?
Yes.
Okay, so here he is talking about, you see the kind of thing that he says, that, it is...
That tab disappeared.
Tab disappeared. Oh God. Now it's come
now
back?
it's come back.
Oh,
Again,
all right.
Okay. Yeah,
So
please
if I
press
open
on
it,
this.
it disappears.
Please press the right tab.
Yeah?
Please press the right tab. I mean, there was some other tab that came out.
This one, is it there? This
Yes,
is not...
yes. Again, it
Russell,
disappeared.
clear?
Went out again.
Okay, went out again. I'm sorry, this is... I'm accustomed to Zoom, where this thing happens quite automatically. And yeah, share. I need some practice with this. Is it clear now? Not clear?
Yeah.
It's clear now.
Yes.
So he is talking about the proofs are a tissue of nonsense. So superposition is logically worthless. He says that, and then he says the fourth proposition is a tissue of nonsense. So there are no axiomatic proofs in the book. And this fact is known for the last 100 years at least. This paper is from something like 1901. And in fact, Hilbert wrote a whole book. It's called Foundations of Geometry. And he supplied the proofs that were missing in Euclid. So the myth is saved. But how is the myth saved? Hilbert's geometry is completely different from Euclidean geometry. And we don't even teach that. We teach some other form of Birkhoff's geometry because we copy things. So the point is, there are no axiomatic proofs, but there was a church myth about the book that there are axiomatic proofs. This has been publicly exposed for the last 100 years. But even now, the most respectable historians are saying that axiomatic proofs are there. And our textbook is saying that Greeks did something superior. They used deductive proof. But deductive proof, they mean axiomatic proof. But it was not used in the proof. The methods of proof were exactly the same as what we used in Indian Ganit. But the myth about it is different. But because that myth was there, today, present-day mathematics for the last century uses this method of axiomatic proof, which is an inferior method according to me. Now, if we can't even change one textbook, one little fact in a textbook where we say, okay, I'm struggling for it for the last 20 years, I'm saying just show the evidence for Euclid or change the book or change don't mention Euclid. And it has such a big struggle, we're not able to do it. You think you are able to change all mathematics across the world overnight? No, it is going to take time. People need to understand that they have been deceived. They have been tricked into believing that this kind of mathematics is superior, and this understanding, because most people don't understand mathematics. You know what happened? No, we're talking of prizes. I yeah, I was in JNU and I gave a rupee 10 lakh prize for proving 1 plus 1 equal to 2. I offered and nobody claimed it. 1 plus 1 equal to 2 in real numbers, of course, one caveat. And the video is there online. Take a look. It is called Statistics for Social Science and Humanities. So I challenged the faculty there and nobody was able to grab it. And I even gave them a week's time. I said, you do it in a week's time, I'll reduce the price to 1 lakh and give you a prize if you still prove 1 plus 1 equal to 2, the way mathematics expects you to do it, formal mathematics. So point is, there is formal reasoning, normal reasoning, but they use one word reason and people confuse, they assume it is scientific reason, whereas it is church reason. And axiomatic reason, so the church controlled mathematics, they controlled it like that, and this is what we are taught through the myth. That is what is wrong about the myth, that it is teaching you a completely different way of doing mathematics. And of course, you see, axiomatic proofs, they say they are infallible. This is completely wrong. See, I have been a math teacher, and so many students turn in wrong proofs. They flunk all the time. Why do they flunk? If it is infallible, then we should not flunk. I mean, it is ridiculous. And in fact, if you take any complex deductive process, like game of chess, everybody will make a mistake in it every time. You take the world champion. He always loses to a machine because he'll make some mistake. You can't lose unless you make a mistake. If you play correctly, chess must end in a draw. So this is the situation that happens. That axiomatic proof is not infallible. It is fallible, and it is of course different. So let me summarize. The point is that Euclid is a false church myth for which there is no evidence. And during the Crusades, the church had a political requirement for axiomatic reasoning or reasoning without facts. So it adopted that method of reasoning and declared it as superior. And the Euclid myth was used to pretend that this strange method of reasoning comes from the Greeks, not from the church. Because if they tell you it comes from the church, you will not accept it. Nobody will accept it. But Greeks, you don't care. And if you expose that lie today, it would make the West look like a fool. But we seem to think we should not make the West look like a fool. We ourselves should be fooled by it. It is really pathetic. So teaching axiomatic mathematics goes against all Indian Ganit, and it puts mathematical authority in the hands of the West. Because all axioms of mathematics from set theory, whether we are talking of Hilbert's axioms or Birkhoff's axioms or axioms for number systems, Peano's axioms, or whatever we are talking about, they are all laid down in the West. And we are only going to work out their consequences. So this is one part. Now, so it doesn't convert us, the church teaching doesn't convert us into Christians, it converts us into Westianity. We are totally subordinate to the West. Now, there is a superstition I want to talk about. That's called, I call it the it works superstition. People say, okay, maybe this was there and so on, but it works. The bridges are there, they are still standing. Bridges were being built long before formal mathematics, long before Euclid came. In fact, Adelard of Bath, who brought Euclid to Europe, he was a crusading spy who was sent to find out how the Arabs built bridges. So it is prior to Euclid. And let's take something more novel. Let's go to rocket trajectories. How do you calculate rocket trajectories? So people don't know. Now, if you look at the text, if you look at this science text, so let me look at the science text. Let me turn this off, Bertrand Russell, and let me share this. Okay. So is this the thing? I hope I can't really see it. I'm just, all right. Can you see this text? Gravitation. This is 9th standard text on science.
Okay, yeah, we can see it.
Able to see it? Now here is this box on Isaac Newton. And this box on Isaac Newton says Newton was also a great mathematician. He invented a new branch of mathematics called the calculus. And then if we talked of 3 laws of motion, I will come back to laws if there is time. But the point is that the calculus is being attributed to Newton. All right. And what difference does it make? It makes a lot of difference. We'll come back to it. The point is, I have written a book, that Cultural Foundations book, and this book points out that the calculus was invented in India. It was invented by the 5th century Aryabhat. Mind you, I'm talking about Aryabhat, who was a lower caste person from Patna, not the Kerala school that came later. It was the Aryabhat school in Kerala. But the point is, rocket trajectories you are calculating, they are done by numerical calculation on a computer. And that technique of numerical solution of differential equations was precisely what Aryabhat used. And every problem of Newtonian physics is a problem which is ultimately solved in practice by numerical solution of differential equations. So this is what happens, that you are using in practice something which is the same technique that you had long back, but there are certain refinements. I won't go into that right now. The point is that we are giving credit. Again, this is the systematic distortion of history. It is called the doctrine of Christian discovery, that Christians, they discover the first Christian to cite a language. There is a papal bull on that. First Christian to cite a land, it becomes its owner. So that is why they said Vasco da Gama discovered India, Columbus discovered America, and that they discovered Australia also, and Newton discovered calculus. So it applies not only to land, also to knowledge. So it's the first Christian who does it, and it's a scandal. It's an absolute scandal. And not only is that a scandal, you see, even the transmission cases was stolen by 3 Christians, and Subhash Kak wrote about it. He wrote about it in Sulekha long back. My project started in 1998, and it was plagiarized. I gave a major international publication, came in 2001. 2000 there was a conference, and this was plagiarized immediately. And he wrote that 3 Britishers, it's the same logic. 3 Britishers have discovered that calculus was transmitted from India. It was repeatedly plagiarized, again plagiarized in 2007 and so on and so forth. But he did not take it back, and now those reports are still floating. So the credit keeps going there, and the point is, it's not just a question of credit, because you don't do the calculus correctly. You don't even, in fact, do Newtonian physics correctly, but that is a much more complex issue. I can't really talk about that right now. So there was this doctrine of Christian discovery. Now, I think I've taken a lot of time, so let me just talk about what is the solution. So I think the solution is that so we should at least start doing systematically the history and philosophy of science. Now, that was the idea with which I designed a course in history and philosophy of science. I taught it several times in Malaysia. I taught it in India, and I think you were interested in pushing it forward. But it never happened. Yeah, you wrote to Kak also, and it never happened. So the point is, we are not interested in the solution. Now, what do I do for that? We want to be slaves. It's not my ghar ki shadi, that I have to run after it and get it done, and something that will happen. And it's not just about teaching in some gurukul. So the point is not merely to preserve indigenous knowledge. The point is to free the mind. Colonial education captures the mind. I talked about trained dogs. That is the whole idea. So it captures the mind, and what I want is to free the mind. That is my objective. So if I go and teach to some people or some a separate group, that's not the idea. We need to change the education system. We need to change the existing textbooks, and at least these small details we can start with. We can start thinking about it. I mean, it is 75 years after independence, and we are not able to change it. That's the colonial legacy that has been left behind, that we become completely incapable of changing. We talk of experts, but those experts are all trained in the same systems, and they will all function behind closed doors. Let them come out and discuss. Let Manjul Bhargav come and discuss it openly. What is this he's talking? He'll go and sit in a committee and he'll talk about it. That's not the interest. Let him debate this whole issue of whether deductive proof is any good. Now, what's wrong with empirical proof? And what's wrong with Indian Ganit? So we are not able to organize such a debate. NCERT is not willing to discuss. They promised me also that they would discuss, but they are not willing to discuss it, not even privately. So if you can't even discuss such an issue, that is an extreme form of superstition that is being perpetuated through the education system, which is the church education system. And that is what it does, and that is something extremely damaging. And there are all other kinds of issues. You think that science cannot be appropriated. You saw, I mentioned in the text that I showed you, maybe it is still there. There are laws of motion, Newton's laws of motion, law of gravitation. What is this law? It's a Christian theological belief stated by Aquinas that God rules the world with eternal laws of motion. From the point of physics, how do I know there are eternal laws of motion? The physics has been done for 200 years. We are talking of eternity. And even in that 200 years, Newtonian physics already failed. It failed a century ago. Why don't we tell them that these are not laws? These are okay, with a good model, maybe worked very well, but it is not a law. It is just a model which was proposed. Just like you have so many COVID models, they come and they go. So it is a model like that, maybe a little more successful, but it's just a model. And we don't, that's the central part of science. You're only making fallible models. And they could all prove to be wrong tomorrow. But if you start talking of laws of nature, then there's a grand vision of the cosmos created by God, controlled by God, and so on. I think I've completed 45 minutes. That's a lot. So I think I should stop at this point.
So my question there is that the Newton's laws of motion,
Yeah.
they were kind of disproved by the special theory of relativity as well
Right.
as by the quantum mechanics theory. And these very laws of motion have been used, the eternal laws have
Yeah.
been used to prop up an entire theology of social sciences also. And that, whereas the Newton's law have been largely been discarded, except in certain frameworks where you do not require too much of accuracy,
Yeah.
but in other frameworks they have been discarded. So shouldn't that be starting point for discarding the theologies that have actually developed on the basis of these Cartesian Newtonian models?
Your question is absolutely right. But you see, there is a finer point here. Why did Newton's laws fail? Now, if we just say that they failed because relativity came in or because quantum mechanics came in, then it seems that there was some development in science and this was proved to be false. But it's a much deeper reason. The argument that I have given is Newton did not understand the calculus, because people who steal knowledge don't understand it. And he did not understand, and what he did was he talked of flow of time. And according to that, he talked of fluxions in the calculus. And those fluxions are complete nonsense. And they have been discarded. Now, this talk of fluxions by Newton shows that he didn't understand what he was talking about. Now, therefore, you see, it's because he assumed time flows, because he assumed that it is this God who has made these laws, and God knows what time it is. Therefore, he says in his Principia that absolute true mathematical time flows on without regard to anything external. Now, without regard to anything external means that you don't have a clock, because God knows what time it is. But actually, his predecessor Barrow, he emphasized, he said that anybody who tries to do physics without having a proper notion of time is a quack. That's the word he used, quack. But Newton took it back and said, okay, God knows and we don't need to know. But his physics failed precisely for that reason. See, where does special theory of relativity come in? It comes in by giving a definition of time, of equal intervals of time. Because Newton's laws don't make sense. Forget about being right or wrong. If you say, take the first law of motion, what does it say? It says that a body covers equal distances in equal times. If I don't know what are equal times, the state of uniform motion or rest. So forget about rest. So it's moving in uniform motion. So it covers equal distances in equal times. And what are equal intervals of time? We don't know. I'll call 1 hour from the past and I'll call 1 hour from the future, and I'll look at both of them right in the present and say they are equal. You can't do that. So you have to define it. And Newton did not define it. And what the special theory of relativity does is to give a definition by postulating that the speed of light is constant. And so point I'm making is, because Newton did not understand the calculus, therefore his physics failed. I mean, still approximately true in some sense. You can use it in many practical situations, no problem about that. But there was lack of understanding. And science is about understanding. If you get some answer by tukkebaji, that is not science. And that is precisely what Berkeley was his church opponent, because you see, Newton was terrifically against the church. He wrote a history of the church, 7-volume history of the church, and he abused church people right, left, and center. And that was never published. But Berkeley tried to put him down for that reason.
There's also this, because you're talking time, and Newton postulated linear, superlinear time. And by the
That is
time you come to quantum mechanics, it becomes what is called the superposition of probability amplitudes. So the entire superlinearity concept goes out through the window. So not
I
only the Newtonian dogma vanishes, the dogma of both Christianity and Islam, which is based on linear superlinear time, that also goes through the window.
No, you're absolutely right. I fully agree with you. But the point is, we are discussing only school text. So we are discussing something that is applied at the level of ninth standard. So I said, what is uniform motion? So they have to know what uniform motion is. Now we get into superlinear time and church theology, that discussion becomes a little bit complex. So I'm just
Yes,
calculus.
no, but we have to discuss calculus by the time we come to the 11th, 12th textbooks.
Yes, but they
And
don't
when
learn.
we discuss calculus, then at that time we have to discuss this linear, superlinear time.
They don't do it because you see what they do is they talk of real numbers. They say calculus is to be done with real numbers, and therefore time is represented by the real numbers. Therefore, it is like a line, superlinear time. But now real numbers, as I said, if I ask somebody what is 1 plus 1 in equal, why is 1 plus 1 equal to 2 in real numbers, give me a formal mathematical proof, because real numbers are formal entity. The real number 1 is not the same thing as the natural number 1, is not the same thing as the rational number 1, and so on. They are distinct entities. So how to prove? Nobody knows. There are some people who know, but if you take your run-of-the-mill person, if you take your, I've asked so many heads of departments of mathematics, including IIT heads, and it gets into a quarrel. So if they don't know what are real numbers, how are they going to do calculus? They are simply mugging and throwing it out. And NCERT is encouraging that, we are there only to mug. We are the slaves of the West. Whatever they say, we must believe and do. We can't apply our own mind. That is what is
Oh,
infuriating.
belief. So again, we are not with the Pratyaksha Praman, but with the Shabda Praman.
Yes, it is Western Shabda Praman. So we must accept whatever they say. And we invented calculus. We don't care why you said it. In fact, that fellow who plagiarized, George Givergis Joseph, he did it from Manchester University. Just took my whole paper, verbatim plagiarized it. And it was published along, it was not published, but it was shown along with my, it was published, but declared to be not published. It's a little complicated. Point is,
I read about it, yes.
so they are not willing to look at it. What the journalist said, it has come from Manchester.
That's a tribute to you, no? If they plagiarize you, that means they are...
Yeah, but I went to PTI office. I went with my book. I said, here is an unpublished work which you are publicizing, putting on the front page of newspapers, all newspapers, and those things are still there on the net. And I said, here is my book. You have seen the book, Cultural Foundations. It's a 500-page book. They said, we don't know. We don't see. It came from Manchester. We believe it. That's the standard of our journalism. It's all Western Shabda Praman. Now, how do you cope with a total ignorance and superstition in belief in the West? How do you counter that? And that's also the central problem with NCERT. How do you counter that? Because that's the stuff that education drills into us. Just imitate the West. That's why I said you talk of trained dogs. It is like that the dog obeys the Shabda Praman of the master. So that is what colonial education did to us. And that is why I said that it's not just a matter of teaching our own system. It's a matter of freeing people from this horrible superstition that you must believe everything that they say. Almost so many things are false. We just saw, how the Euclid story is false, how the Newton story is false. So many falsehoods. And they lead to bad mathematics and they lead to bad science. And we are not able to do anything about it because we keep saying that, we don't want to think of those things and it is not our job. What is that charge of the right brigade? So there's not even reason why there's but to do and die. It is that kind of thing that we teach our students. It's very sad, and I think the new education policy is there. We talk of concepts. Just imagine. So with this formal mathematics, we teach concept sixth standard concept of a geometric point. It is invisible. Now, how can there be conceptual clarity if I say it's invisible? It is like Harry Potter, or it's like a ghost. Now, what does an invisible point do? How do I measure? If I want to actually measure something or do it practically, I will make visible marks and then I will measure out an area. But here it's invisible. Now you don't know what it does. Does it dance around? Does it stay in one place? What does it do? And people get so indoctrinated. They tell me, you don't understand the difference between mathematics and physics. I do both mathematics and physics. I do understand very clearly the difference. Those guys don't understand what they've taught. They believe that whatever they were taught as children is true. That's the basis of indoctrination. You stuff something in the mind of a child. It's very hard for him to take it out. My own grandchild fights with me. He learnt it like this, and that is how it is. There can't be anything different. So if you stuff things in the minds of children at an early age, very difficult to take it out at a later stage. It takes a lot of effort. I was myself a formal mathematician. It took me so many years to unlearn what I had learned. So I think this is a very dangerous situation, very difficult situation. And it's not just, people are looking for minor political advantage. Oh, if you try to change it, there will be a political storm. I think we have to face that political storm. We can't try and avoid it. We must face it because it's a matter of future generations. It's not a matter of, who is going to be ruling here or there. It's a matter of the entire, the minds of a billion Indians. We can't just let it go for some small time advantage. We must tackle it. It is absolutely essential. Now, I've been trying to talk about it, but it somehow doesn't happen. People have not even understood that Euclid is a church myth, that it is leading us into a church method of reasoning, that church method of reasoning is axiomatic reasoning, and that is again used in calculus, in real numbers, everywhere. And it mucks up everything. It mucks up our philosophical system. It mucks up the religious beliefs. We don't understand it. And to understand, there must be a debate. You see, the way you had Dayanand Saraswati, he went and he debated, and people were willing to debate. And then you can decide who won, who lost. That's a different matter. But at least if you debate, the fundamentals become clear. So we need to organize some kind of a big debate on this. And the debate may take time. You may need to debate it for a week. You can't just do it. Half an hour is just to bring things out. But we need to organize these kinds of debates. I have been trying very hard for the last so many years. The mathematicians run away. I tried to organize a meeting in Shimla. I tried to organize in the Indian Social Science Academy and so on. And they don't want to come. Formal mathematicians run away from the debate. I tried asking the minister. I tried asking everybody. It just doesn't happen. So how do you do in this situation? It's a really horrible situation.
It's very difficult to organize debates. Not many people are coming forward.
They're not coming
They
forward.
only go to TV channel debates where they're very comfortable and they get paid for that, for doing about sitting there for 1 hour and getting to speak for 1 or 2 minutes. And that also, all they speak is, if they can shout well, only then they can get their word in. That is the kind of debate that people got used to. The real debates hardly happen. So I think I
Well,
agree completely with you that we do need to organize it.
yeah, even that would be good.
Why don't you organize it in the IIAS?
I tried, but it was difficult to get people to come. And I floated a proposal. I'm told it was approved, but I have still not got the formal approval. So somewhere it got stuck. I spent quite some time organizing it. So certainly I will try. I'll continue doing it, and let us hope that it happens. And now the good thing is that some of my stuff is going to be translated, and I think that will also help to start a debate.
Okay. Translated into?
French and Spanish.
Okay. So on that note, I think we can move to the question answers. There
Yeah.
are a few questions.
Yeah.
And also at that point, I request all my viewers to please subscribe our channel, to share the video, like the video, press the bell icon, and also help us with your support.
Press the bell icon on YouTube and don't miss another update.
Pratap Ramachandra, namaste, sir. JD and a few other groups are doing a good job of constructive criticism of Government of India and showing them right direction. Hope GOI listens to well-wishers instead of listening to clowns. Well, if somebody wants to listen to clowns, you can't stop them. That's always there. So, and it's easier listening to them because you don't have to exercise your faculties. Next, quantum spin. Is it true that AP and GP was used for Ganapata way of remembering Vedic mantras? However, Sanskrit letters used in Mendeleev's periodic table. So actually, there are two questions here.
I don't know about Sanskrit letters being used in Mendeleev's periodic table. But if you're talking about arithmetic progression and geometric progression, you certainly find it all across, in not just in Indian mathematics. You find it also in you find it in the Ved, you find it in Egyptian mathematics, and so on. But what is the point of this question so far as NCERT school texts are concerned? So they are
Well, I
found.
think he's more talking more about the history of Indian
Yeah. So
history and philosophy of Indian science and maths. And if we were taught that, then we would probably be taught this as well.
The most interesting thing about the geometric progression is geometric progression, as I said, is found also in Egypt. A very interesting geometric progression. It's found in Egyptian architecture. What is called. But the interesting part is that Indians were the first to sum the infinite geometric series. So finite geometric series, people knew about it from a long time, from Vedic times, from the earliest known history. But the sum of an infinite geometric series comes out first time in India, but it involves a completely different philosophy of mathematics from the limits and real numbers that are taught in calculus texts. So that's a slightly complicated thing, and I think that would require a full separate session. The kind of non-Archimedean arithmetic and so on of Brahma group that was used. So it will require me to explain with slides and so on.
Okay. How did the church know exactly what to steal? Quantum spin.
How to?
How did the church know exactly what to steal?
No. They didn't know what to steal. They just stole everything. And you see, when the Arabic text came, it was mass translation. And one of the Euclid texts, if you see, Adelard of Bath, he went as a crusading spy. He was disguised as a Muslim student. So he learned under Muslims what they were doing. And he came back and he said that this is a text based on reasoning. And so far as the Toledo library was concerned, they just mass translated everything, including Al-Ghazali, including Ibn Rushd, and so on. Lots of things were translated. The issue is later on, see, they apart from this crusading model, there was also an inquisitional model. So if you see what Copernicus did, so Copernicus copied from Ibn Shatir, and he was afraid to reveal his sources because he would have been condemned for heresy. But then this doctrine of Christian discovery, you see, there were whole texts. The Jesuits were here in India. They had a whole college. And in that college, they were teaching Malayalam to the local Syrian Christians. And they had formed a connection with them, and they knew what things were available, and they were translating local texts. They were translating, they were building dictionaries and so on. So they sent these things, and they knew because they had a problem of navigation, because that was a very major problem so far as the Britain was concerned, so far as all Europe was concerned. The European navigational problem was a very major problem. And so they realized that for navigation, what you need is you needed trigonometric values, precise trigonometric values, and you needed a good calendar. So good calendar was needed for determining latitude, and precise trigonometric values were needed for determining longitude, for determining the size of the earth, and so on. So they had people who were trained in that. Matteo Ricci, when he came to Cochin, he was looking for a calendar, because at that time they were doing the calendar reform. Gregorian calendar reform was done in 1581, precisely with a view to fix your problem of latitude, because they did not know how to fix latitude in daytime. At night you can see the pole star, but that also only if you are in the northern hemisphere. But in daytime you have only the sun. So to determine it, this is explained in my book on Raju Ganit, how Indians did it. And this was a traditional technique, old technique, which is known to lots of civilizations. So they had people who were spying. So the Jesuits who were here, who were systematically picking up Indian knowledge, just like George Joseph spied on me. He sent one Dennis Almeida to spy on me and take my papers under some false pretext. So that is how they know. They send spies, they pretend to be your friend, and they capture the thing, and they know what is valuable, and they use it. Sometimes they don't know. Well, most of the times thieves don't know. But this was the general process. I hope that is clear. I hope that answers your question.
Okay, next. Gaurav Garg, my uncle, PhD Maths IIT, said Dr. C.K. Raju talks about calculus without limits. But when we try to understand in detail, there is nothing much he has to say. He just
No,
says,
no.
when approximation is enough, why to use limits?
I am
How
not
would you
saying
respond?
approximation is enough. I am not saying that. That is a complete misconception. It's a complete misconception. I have not said that. I have said, please read what I have written in all in my, for example, calculus papers in the Springer Encyclopedia. Now, this whole idea, or the article I have written on decolonizing mathematics. So it is non-Archimedean arithmetic, very clearly and simply. Brahmagupta used polynomials, and polynomials constitute non-Archimedean arithmetic. Since you are a PhD, you should understand what non-Archimedean arithmetic is. So I can use that. Now, non-Archimedean arithmetic does not have limits. What can you do about it? It's not approximation. It does not have limits. In a non-Archimedean field, you cannot have limits. And any field which is larger than the field of real numbers will be non-Archimedean. All right. So the polynomial methods will be non-Archimedean. Now, what do you do in non-Archimedean arithmetic? You have to discard infinitesimals, because there are infinities and infinitesimals in a non-Archimedean field. I talk about this in my lectures. Please take a look. Those lectures are online. The lectures that I gave at SDT University, for example, I have explained what non-Archimedean arithmetic is. I have explained how polynomials constitute non-Archimedean arithmetic, why you have infinities and infinitesimals, but I can't talk about it. So if you want, I mean, this is the simple thing, that you don't have limits with a non-Archimedean field. It's not approximation. You don't have limits. What are you going to do? You don't have exactitude. You have to have a method of handling inexactitude, and that is where I get into zeroism. So it's a complex thing. Now, yes, you can say you should write a textbook. I have been taking lectures. I will write a textbook some point of time. I have so many books to write. And I'm including this non-Archimedean arithmetic in my second edition of this, making it explicit. Does that answer your question, or you have some follow-up question?
Okay, if he has a follow-up, he will ask.
Yeah.
Now, another question by Suresh Kandam. He says, I'm unfamiliar with your works. I recently watched a few videos of N.J. Wildberger. He has made similar arguments about real and infinite analysis having no foundations. Please point me to your work. Well, that I can point you. It doesn't.
Yeah.
You can, some of them, that's a cultural foundation of mathematics. That is one. Then you have what is called that big one, which I also find difficult to read. That
that
PDF.
time towards a consistent theory. No, that's not about calculus. But if you want about calculus, there is an argument on, it is not about infinite things being wrong. That is a separate matter. You see, this is another trick that the church played, that the metaphysics of infinity that we talk about in mathematics is tied to church dogmas of eternity. Now, I don't like to talk about all this because nobody understands. If you don't understand real numbers, now what is the use of saying metaphysics of infinity is tied to dogmas of eternity? You don't understand church theology. What do I do? So to be able to explain, it takes time. Now you can take a look at my paper on decolonizing mathematics. I have explained how an infinite series is summed using non-Archimedean arithmetic. All right, it is not done with limits because, as I said, the infinite geometric series was summed. How was it summed? The fact is that Milton gave the sum of the infinite geometric series correctly. How did he arrive at it? So they believe that, he did not have limits. So what did he use? And this is something we have not bothered to look at because so much it is drilled into us, you must use limits. West uses limits, so you must use limits. Now, my argument is that the West did not understand. The West has a superstition that mathematics is exact. It's a superstition. Nothing is exact in the world. Absolutely nothing. You are not exact. I am not exact. Nothing is exact. You name one thing which stays exact for two instants of time. So when things are not, this is where the whole issue of Buddhist Shunyavad comes in. That you have to understand how to live in a world where things are inexact. So you need
I think we can recommend to him the 11 pictures of time.
Yeah, but that's not again on mathematics. It's a simpler book. It's not on mathematics. Yeah. There's
There's a lot of mathematics and the concepts are there. And he's asking generally about your work. So I think I would recommend to him the 11 pictures of time, the cultural foundations of mathematics. The third one is science Western in origin. And the fourth one, Euclid and Jesus. It's a small book. How and why. I think these four you could start with.
Yeah, sure.
Mr. Gandham. And then, of course, you'll get many references. And if you have the stomach, I did not have, so you can go to the time a consistent theory of quantum spin. We read a paper on how Puri Shankaracharya Bharati Tirthji stole formulas to appropriate calculus in the name of Vedic maths. Comments.
There is no Vedic math. I am on record on that we should not demean the Ved by using it as a sales tactic. All right. So you say you have some mental math, do it, but it is not in the Ved. Why do you want to demean the Ved? Use it. It is something sacred. You keep it sacred. Why do you want to use it for such petty purposes? So it is not there in the Ved, and it is some basic arithmetic, mental arithmetic. Let's leave it at that. All right.
Next. Kaushik Singh. Church killed Copernicus and they talk about science. Okay.
Church did not kill Copernicus. Church, see, this is what you need to understand, that it is not a simple story of church being at war with science. Church did not kill Copernicus. Copernicus was afraid because he lived in the times of Inquisition. His friend Sculptatus was arrested by the Inquisition and tortured by the Inquisition. So therefore, Copernicus did not publish his book until he was on his deathbed. And even when he did, he cited one pope, two cardinals, and so on in the introduction. The point is, the simplistic story of church being at war with science is what I have told you is wrong. See, church brought science to us. All the top science colleges in the country are St. Stephen's, for example, or mathematics colleges. If you take Madras Christian College, or you take your Xavier's College, or you take your Loreto Convent, how come the church is so foolish that it does not understand and it brought science to us when the science is its enemy? Please think about it. Just think about it. That you heard a story. This is the whole point of colonial teaching. It's anti-knowledge. It teaches you stories and you believe those stories. So church did not kill Copernicus. It did not kill Galileo. Okay, but the church did do certain things. It did bring science to us. Why did it bring science to us? What was the benefit for the church? You think it does not understand this simple story which you know? Church did not know, and it has brought it for 200 years. Nobody told the church that this is the story. So please think about it. And the thing is that you have been fooled. So you need to understand how you were fooled. You were fooled by putting in this stuff about Euclid in your textbook, which you could not understand in 200 years. And which you can't change today. Even if you understand, you can't change. I understand. I'm not in a position to change it. So I think this is what you need to understand, that this is like the old man of the sea, it just gets a grip of you right from the childhood, and then it's very difficult to shake off. So don't go by all these stories. I'm telling you a completely different story, that the church has captured mathematics, and that through mathematics, church dogmas get into science. It's a completely different story from the conflict of science and religion. So please think about it.
Right. Next. Nitin Veturkar. Thank you, Nitin. Thank you for your contribution. Ritesh. Okay. Yes, Sandesh. Okay. Thank you for this Sandesh, but it is not related to this topic. I will just remember it. R. Tambe. What are your views about N.N. Talib's critic of Western science, that it is institutionalized, uses citation loops, wrong stats, and not practical evidence?
Well, I don't know who N.N. Talib is. I must
It was
confess
the
my
same Talib.
ignorance.
It's quite famous otherwise.
Maybe I have not heard of his critic, so I will have to see it. But I would agree that institutionalized science is a big problem today, and I have written against it. I mean, the method of secretive refereeing, first of all, that is very problematic. And you should have open
Citation
debate.
loops, I think that's a very valid point.
Yes, you go on citing because you want to. I agree with that. I have written against this citation index article on benchmarking science, and I have written a little booklet on ending academic imperialism, where this is what I recommended. So I agree there is so much money there. So many of these things have crept into science, which is not any longer any search for truth. It's a search for publication, and all sorts of things happen in the process. And I would generally agree with that, whosoever this Talib may be.
Okay, next. Suresh Gandham, what is your advice for highly motivated parents and their children in the current situation? Any outline or list of resources that is useful for parents and teachers that can be used?
Yeah, I have a book on Raju. And the idea is that if you say that Euclid is no good, then you have to offer an alternative. So I've offered an alternative, and that alternative begins by criticizing how is the child going to understand what an invisible point is, how is the child going to understand what a invisible straight line is, how is the child going to use it to measure a field which is not regular, and so on. So those are all questions which are taught in that book, and this is an alternative, because if you criticize something, then it is important to produce an alternative. So I have produced an alternative, and I would start by recommending that, because that's the school level. And then, of course, there is this course on calculus without limits. Hopefully, I will write a textbook on it so that people understand that it's not just simple approximation, because they tend to trivialize it. Without going into depth, they trivialize it. It must be some silly thing. It's not some silly thing. So it takes some effort to do that. And the problem is that for children, you need to write textbooks. I have a textbook at school level. I think that would be enough to serve as a counter to the propaganda that goes on about formal mathematics.
Okay, next. Gyanesh Bhaganagari. Are Saturn's rings mentioned in Indian scriptures?
I have not found any such mention.
Adventure Time, sir. I accept that we had add advanced science, but did we have advanced technology? If no, then is the West correct in claiming that modern civilization, post-industrial revolution, is made by them?
No, I think that if you're looking at what exactly do you mean by technology, so if we start by looking at simple stuff like, say, steel technology. The steel technology was, there are a whole lot of technologies which were absorbed from India. So even today, if you go to Delhi, you can see the Ashok pillar and look at that steel. Now, this steel technology was used in cannons, it was used in sword making, and so on and so forth. So, the question of technology is a slightly different question. I think the West has always told false history. The central point I would like to make is that the history, if the figures like Newton, Euclid, Copernicus, everybody is false, why do you believe any story they tell you? Because they conquered you by telling stories. We are superior, we are superior, we are superior. That's the one story they have told. And it's a totally false story. So their superiority is based on genocide. It's based on slavery. It is based on all kinds of things. They acquired wealth on that basis. On colonialism, they acquired wealth, and all they gave us in return was some silly stories that they are superior. So if you want to believe those stories, by all means believe. If you want to investigate, the whole point I am making is you need to investigate. So we don't want to investigate. Have you investigated this question? Instead of just asking me, look at technology. Why don't you investigate it? Who's going to investigate it? Why should I give an answer to every such thing? There are no resources available. Just to dig out that one little letter of Matteo Ricci, how much money it costs. And there are no resources available. There is not a single department of history, philosophy, or science in the country. How do you expect answers to, generalized questions like that? So my general answer will be that this whole story about the West being superior is false. Look at Needham. Needham is still talking falsehood about Euclid after it has been exposed publicly that it is false. Oh, we had something great. We had something great. That's a church tactic, I'm telling you, to use false history to pretend to be superior. Not just about what will happen in the future, but to say that we are superior now. So always this is the form of the story. We did something special, we are superior. We are Christians, we are superior. We are whites, we are superior. We are West, we are superior. And you can't see the pattern and you don't really investigate, that's a problem.
Okay, next.
Yeah.
Why we hesitate to claim ancient wisdom? Well, it's a very general kind of question. At least Dr. Raju doesn't hesitate, and Jaipur Dialogues doesn't hesitate. So, Batman. Who invented Laplace X forms? Was it Bhaskaracharya?
Who invented Laplace transforms? He wants to say Laplace transform. No, you see, I don't think that it was Bhaskaracharya who invented. I am not saying that everything that the West did, absolutely nothing. Of course, Laplace was a great thief. I've written about how he stole from all sorts of people, but I don't see any mention of Laplace transform or Fourier transform in Bhaskaracharya. At least I have not found it. All right. So let's not say that everything came from India. I'm not saying that. A lot of interesting, significant things came, and the basic philosophy came. The philosophy of Ganit of that Bhaskaracharya used is quite different. The philosophy of calculus that he used is quite different from what Laplace used. So I think we need to focus on that, and we need to focus on what is coming out, not merely complex numbers. Laplace, of course, they did something new. I'm not saying they were totally devoid of creativity.
Right. Next. Madhav Padiyar. Thank God I was a bad student at school. You survived the dogma. Sanjay is saying, is N. Jha's IVC script decipher correct? I don't know myself.
I'm not into Indus Valley script.
You see, this is not again a talk about IVC. Next.
Yeah.
Okay, so that brings us to the end of this session. Wonderfully enlightening as always, Dr. C.K. Raju. And it's difficult to get hold of him, but whenever we do, we try to get maximum out of him. So thank you very much, Dr. Raju, and thank you very much to the audience. Thank you. Jai Hind, Vande Mataram.